I never thought I'd live to see the day when my own family would look at me like I was a burden. It's strange, isn't it? The people you love most can make you feel like you're worth the least. My name's David Carter, and for most of my life, I was the quiet one in the family. The one who never complained, never argued, never asked for much. I believed love meant patience, and family meant loyalty. But I was wrong. Family sometimes is just a word, until life tests what it really means. It started the year my health went downhill. I'd worked nearly 20 years at a construction company. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. One morning, I slipped off a scaffold, not far, just enough to tear a few muscles and crack my lower spine. The doctors said I'd walk again, but it would take time. Months, maybe years. When I came home from the hospital, I expected care, or at least kindness. What I got instead were sighs, whispers, and looks that made me feel like a broken tool. My younger brother, Michael, had taken over most of my duties at the family home. My sister Linda, a sharp-tongued woman who worked in real estate, made sure everyone knew how much she was helping me, buying groceries, driving me to therapy, paying a few bills when my insurance got slow. But it wasn't kindness. It was control disguised as care. They'd talk in the living room like I wasn't even there. "David's lucky we're here for him," Linda would say. "I mean, he can't really handle much on his own now." Michael would nod, adding, "Yeah, he's not the same anymore. Probably can't even go back to work." Every word chipped away at me. They didn't mean to sound cruel, but they did. And after a while, I started believing them. Maybe I was useless. Maybe I really was the burden they saw. Mom was the only one who tried to keep the peace. She'd sit beside my bed some nights, holding my hand, whispering, "You've always been the strong one, David. Don't let them make you forget that." But as her health started failing too, the balance shifted completely. When she passed away, the house, the only property she owned, became the center of quiet chaos. That's when I saw people's true faces. Michael and Linda started talking about selling the house almost immediately. "It's too big for us to manage," Linda said. "Besides," Michael added, "Mom would have wanted us to use the money for something useful, maybe invest, or move into something modern." I sat there in silence, still in my wheelchair, still recovering, wondering how quickly love could turn into calculation. They called a family meeting one evening. Just the three of us, or four, if you count Linda's husband, Robert, who liked to think of himself as the smartest man in the room. Linda spread the papers on the dining table, tapping them like a lawyer. "We've already spoken to a buyer," she said. "It's a good deal, we'll split it equally. It'll help all of us." Then she turned to me, smiling faintly. "You just need to sign here, David." Her words hung in the air like a trap. I looked at the papers, the house deed, the transfer forms, and something inside me froze. Something didn't feel right. "Who's the buyer?" I asked. Linda hesitated. "It's a company that buys old houses. Don't worry about it." But I did worry. Because even though I looked weak, I wasn't stupid. And for the first time in months, I saw the greed hiding behind their concern. That night, when everyone had gone to bed, I rolled my wheelchair into Mom's old study. She used to keep her will in the top drawer. I remembered her words, "Don't let them make you forget who you are." I found the document and read it carefully. To my surprise, the house wasn't meant to be divided. It was to go entirely to me, with the note that I could share it with family if I wished. I sat there for a long time, the words burning through my mind. She had trusted me, the so-called burden, to protect what she built. The next morning, when Linda came by again with her smile and her pen, I looked her in the eyes and said quietly, "I'm not signing anything." She frowned, like she couldn't believe what she just heard. "What do you mean?" "It's for all of us." I nodded slowly. "Then maybe we should all start by being honest about what Mom wanted." That was the first time I saw fear flicker in her eyes. She realized I knew. And in that moment, something changed inside me. The weakness, the guilt, the silence, all of it began to fade. I wasn't their burden anymore. I was the one thing standing between them and what they wanted most. That day I decided. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't fight. I would wait. And when the time was right, I'd let their own greed destroy them, quietly, completely. I grew up in a quiet town called Millstone Creek, a small American suburb where everyone knew everyone, and secrets had short legs. Our house stood on the edge of a long gravel road, surrounded by maple trees that turned red every fall. It wasn't big or fancy, but it was ours. My father, George Carter, built half of it with his own hands. He used to say, "If you want something to last, you build it with care, not hurry." That's how I was raised, to take my time, to do things right, to live steady and simple. But the rest of my family wasn't wired that way. My brother Michael was born with charm and ambition in his blood. Even as a kid, he loved attention. He could talk his way out of any trouble, and usually did. He wasn't cruel, he was just selfish in that subtle way where he always found a way to win, no matter what. Then there was Linda, our sister. Sharp as a knife, always 2 steps ahead. She was Dad's favorite when it came to brains. "That girl will make something of herself," he used to say proudly. And she did, a successful real estate agent with her own office, nice car, perfect smile, and a tone that made everyone feel like they owed her something. Me? I was the quiet one. The one who fixed the fence, painted the porch, took care of Mom when she got sick, and stayed home when others went out to live. I didn't resent it. I actually liked it that way. I never wanted much. Just peace. When Dad died, I was 23. He had a heart attack in the middle of winter, shoveling snow. I still remember standing beside Mom at the funeral, watching the casket lower into the frozen ground, and promising her, "I'll take care of things." And I did. For years, I worked long shifts, paid bills, fixed pipes, kept the garden alive, and made sure Mom never had to worry. Meanwhile, Michael moved to another city, chasing job after job, always talking about big plans that somehow never lasted. Linda stayed close, but mostly because she liked having control. She'd visit with expensive gifts and advice no one asked for. Mom loved us all, but she relied on me most. "David's my anchor," she'd say. And she meant it. But when people hear that often enough, they start believing the anchor is just stuck. By the time I turned 45, I'd accepted my place in the background. I wasn't married. Never had the time or courage for it. Every time I thought about settling down, something came up: a leaky roof, Mom's doctor visits, a storm that ruined half the porch. Life has a way of keeping quiet people busy. Still, I was content. Until that accident. It happened on a cold March morning. I was working on site, patching a roof frame, when the scaffolding gave way. A second too late, and everything went black. I woke up in a hospital room 2 days later. The ceiling light felt like fire in my eyes, my legs like dead weight. The doctor's words came slowly: "You're lucky to be alive, Mr. Carter. It could have been worse. You'll walk again, but it's going to take time." Time. That's what everyone said. But no one warned me what that time would feel like. The quiet days, the stares, the pity, the slow erosion of dignity. At first, my siblings were kind. Linda visited often, bringing food and flowers, updating me about the town gossip. Michael came less, but when he did, he acted like a hero. "Don't worry, big bro, I'll handle things." But slowly, I became invisible. They'd talk about their lives, their plans, their expenses, right in front of me, as if I was just furniture. And every time I tried to help or contribute, they brushed me off. "David, you should rest. You don't need to worry about that. You've done enough already." It sounded like care, but it wasn't. It was dismissal. They didn't want me involved anymore. Not in decisions, not in discussions, not even in dreams. When Mom's health started fading, I saw how much they wanted her gone. Not because they didn't love her, but because she was the only reason they still pretended to be a family. The night before she died, she called me to her bedside. Her voice was soft, barely a whisper. "David," she said, "you've always been patient. Promise me you'll stay that way. Don't let bitterness take you. One day, they'll need you more than you need them. You'll see." I held her hand until it went cold. And I promised. When she was gone, I thought the hardest part was over. But in truth, that's when the real test began. At the funeral, Linda took charge of everything: flowers, guests, even the eulogy. She spoke about Mom's kindness and strength, tears glistening in her eyes like pearls. People admired her composure, her grace. But I knew her better. I saw how she stood just far enough from me to make it seem like I wasn't part of the picture. Michael, as usual, played the role of the emotional son, hugging everyone, promising to keep the family together. After the burial, we gathered at the house, our family home. The air was heavy with grief and unspoken tension. I watched them walk through each room, eyes scanning the furniture, the pictures, the walls, not with nostalgia but calculation. I knew that look. They were already dividing things in their heads. In the weeks that followed, the masks started slipping. Linda began hinting that maintaining the house would be too much for me. Michael said he was worried about my expenses and thought selling would be a smart move. They always wrapped their greed in concern. And I let them. I listened, nodded, stayed quiet, because that's what quiet people do. But inside, something had started to stir. Not anger. Not yet. Just a quiet realization that I had been used all my life, as a caretaker, as a listener, as a placeholder. When I refused to sign those papers the first time, it wasn't defiance. It was the first step toward remembering who I really was. I started paying attention again. To their words. Their visits. Their sudden politeness. I noticed how Linda's tone changed whenever she mentioned the buyer, the one who wanted to purchase our house. She said it was a company, but I knew real estate well enough to recognize a lie when I heard one. I kept quiet. I smiled. I played the fool they thought I was. Because I knew what Mom had told me, they'd need me one day. And when that day came, I wanted to be ready. Late at night, I'd sit by the window in my wheelchair, staring at the maple trees. Their leaves would sway under the moonlight like they were whispering old secrets. I'd think about Dad, about the house he built with his hands, and the way he used to say, "If you want something to last, build it slow." Maybe revenge was the same way. Maybe it wasn't about striking back, but waiting long enough for the truth to show itself. Because the thing about greedy people is, you don't have to destroy them. Just give them enough time, and they'll do it themselves. And I was patient. Very patient. The weeks after I refused to sign those papers felt like walking through a quiet storm. No one shouted. No one argued. But the air was charged, like thunder waiting behind the clouds. Linda stopped visiting as often. Michael became suddenly busy. And when they did come by, it wasn't out of care, it was to check whether I had changed my mind. At first, I tried to keep things civil. I offered coffee, smiled politely, listened to their small talk. But beneath every word was the same question, circling closer like a vulture. Have you signed yet? I hadn't. And I didn't plan to. One afternoon, Michael showed up unannounced. He stood at the door with that practiced half-smile, the one he used when he wanted something. "Hey man," he said, stepping inside. "You look good. You been doing your therapy?" "Every day," I said. "Doctor says I'll be walking with a cane soon." He nodded, eyes scanning the house. "That's great. I mean, that's really great." He paused near the old photo wall, running a hand over the frame of our family picture. "Crazy how time flies, huh? Feels like yesterday we were all sitting here, watching football with Dad." I knew where this was going. I could almost hear the shift in his tone before he even said it. "Listen," he continued, "about the house. Linda's been trying to handle everything, but she's under a lot of pressure. The market's changing, you know? We should move quick before it loses value." I stayed quiet, sipping my coffee. He sighed, pretending frustration. "Come on, Dave. It's just a signature. We'll all benefit. You'll get your share, more than fair." I looked at him then, really looked. My brother, the same one who used to borrow money from me, who I helped out of trouble more times than I could count. His eyes weren't those of a brother anymore, they were a salesman's. "What if I don't want to sell?" I said calmly. His smile faded. "What do you mean?" "I mean maybe Mom's house stays with Mom's son," I replied. He laughed, that dry, nervous kind of laugh people make when they're caught off guard. "Dave, you can't handle this place alone. You can barely walk. What happens when something breaks? When taxes come? You think Linda or I can keep helping forever?" "I never asked for help," I said softly. That hit him harder than I expected. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, muttered something under his breath, and left. I watched from the window as his car pulled away, kicking dust down the gravel road. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel weak. I felt aware. The silence between us grew wider after that. A month passed with no calls, no visits. The loneliness was heavy, but in it, I found something I hadn't had in years: clarity. I started sorting through Mom's papers, tax files, insurance slips, old letters. The more I looked, the more I realized how much she had protected me without saying a word. Then, buried under a stack of bank documents, I found something strange: a joint ownership letter from her lawyer. It stated that any sale of the house required unanimous consent of all beneficiaries. In other words, they couldn't sell without me. That single sheet of paper turned the entire game around. They thought I was helpless. They thought I had no cards left. But I had the only one that mattered. A week later, Linda called. Her tone was sweet, too sweet. "David, it's been a while. How are you?" "I'm doing fine," I said. "And you?" "Oh, busy as ever." "Listen, I've got great news. Remember that buyer? They're increasing their offer. It's a really good deal, and they've already drafted everything. We just need you to sign. Michael and I already did." I let a pause stretch between us. "You already signed?" "Yes," she said quickly. "It's standard procedure. You just need to finish it up." I smiled to myself. "Linda, does this buyer happen to have your last name?" The line went silent. "How did you?" "I didn't," I interrupted. "I guessed." She exhaled sharply. "David, don't be difficult. We're family. We're doing what's best for everyone. You can't keep this old place forever." I kept my voice steady. I think Mom wanted me to decide that. Then I hung up. 2 days later, I got a letter from a law office, a notice of intent to sell inherited property. My name was listed as the only non-cooperative beneficiary. It was bold, even for them. They were trying to pressure me legally, hoping I'd panic or give up. Instead, I called Mom's old lawyer, Mr. Harlan, a kind older man who'd known our family for decades. He remembered me immediately. "Ah, David. How's that back of yours?" he asked warmly. "Getting better," I said. "Listen, I need your help. My siblings are trying to sell the family house. But I believe Mom's will give me full authority. I found the papers, but I want to be sure." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Come in tomorrow. Bring everything you found." When I rolled into his office the next day, he looked both surprised and impressed at how organized I was. We spent an hour going through every page, and when he finally leaned back in his chair, he said with a small smile, "David, you're right. The will is airtight. Your mother left the property solely to you. The others have no claim unless you choose to share it." I nodded slowly. "So they can't sell it?" "Not a chance," he said. "They can threaten, but they'll lose in court. You hold all the rights." For a moment, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. All that guilt they'd poured on me, all the ways they made me feel like a burden, and yet, I was the one holding everything together. I thanked him and left quietly. I didn't tell anyone what I'd learned. Because power, when handled silently, becomes 10 times stronger. Over the next few weeks, the tension deepened. Linda started spreading rumors around town that I was unstable and holding the family back. Michael stopped answering my calls altogether. One evening, I overheard Linda talking on the porch while she thought I was asleep. "I swear, Robert, he's doing this just to spite us. We helped him for months, and now he's playing the victim. I'll make sure he regrets it." Robert mumbled something I couldn't hear, but I caught his last words: "He's harmless. Just let it go." She didn't. 2 days later, I found the garden shed unlocked. Tools missing. Mail opened. Small things, but enough to make me realize they were trying to break me down, piece by piece. Still, I stayed calm. Because when people show you their worst, the best revenge is not reacting, it's watching. Then came the call that changed everything. It was from a local bank manager who said, "Mr. Carter, just confirming your request to refinance your property. We'll need your ID on file." "My what?" I asked. He repeated, "Your refinance request, signed last week by your co-owner, Ms. Linda Carter." I froze. They were forging my name. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about all the years I'd spent being the quiet one, the peacemaker, the patient son. And for the first time, I realized something. Being good had cost me too much. But even then, I didn't want to fight them with anger. I wanted to fight them with truth. I went back to Mr. Harlan the next morning and told him everything. His face hardened. "Forging documents? That's serious, David. We can report it." "I don't want them in jail," I said quietly. "I just want them to see what they've become." He nodded slowly, understanding. "Then let's play it smart." He suggested we freeze all ownership transfers and file a property protection order with the local clerk's office. It would alert any lender or buyer that the title was under dispute, effectively blocking any sale. We did it the same day. And from that moment on, the house became untouchable. When Linda found out, she came storming in, red-faced, trembling with fury. "How could you do this to us, David?" she shouted. "Do you realize what you've done? You've ruined everything." I looked at her calmly. "Ruined what, Linda?" "The plan to sell Mom's house behind my back." "It's not your house," she snapped. "It's all of ours." I smiled faintly. "Not according to Mom's will." She froze. Her face went pale. You found it?" I nodded. "And you forged my signature." She stammered something, but no words came out. "Leave," I said softly. "Before you say something you can't take back." She glared at me, then turned and slammed the door. That night, the silence in the house felt heavier than ever. I sat in the living room, surrounded by the smell of old wood and faint echoes of laughter that used to live here. For years, I thought being quiet was weakness. But now I saw it differently. Silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. Because in silence, you can see what noise tries to hide. And I had seen enough. The people I once loved had become strangers driven by greed, and I, the man they called a burden, now held the only power they couldn't manipulate. But this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of their downfall, a downfall I didn't have to create. I only had to wait for it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone to save me. I wasn't expecting an apology, a miracle, or even understanding. I simply decided to take control of my own silence. That winter, I packed my old suitcase, the same one I brought when I first came to this house after college, and left. No drama, no tears. I just left a note that said, "Thank you for everything. I hope someday we'll remember each other with kindness." I moved into a small, quiet apartment near the edge of town. The rent wasn't cheap, but the peace was worth every cent. I got a job offer from a publishing house where I had interned years ago. They remembered my dedication and hired me immediately. In the beginning, it was lonely. The silence was sharp, but different now. It wasn't empty. It was healing. I started cooking again, reading again, laughing again. I found myself talking to my plants like they were old friends, and in a way they were. They didn't ask for explanations. They just grew quietly beside me. I learned to love solitude, not as a punishment, but as a sanctuary. Months passed. One afternoon, while I was working late at the office, my phone rang. It was my cousin, Noah. He sounded anxious. "Hey. I don't know how to say this, but Uncle Robert's business is in trouble. Your father's name is on a few of the legal documents. They need your signature to move forward with the restructuring." I sat there for a long time after hanging up. My father's voice, cold and dismissive, echoed in my mind. "You're a burden, Emily." And now, the burden they had cast away was the only one who could hold everything together. I didn't rush to call back. I didn't feel angry or triumphant. I just felt calm. There's a certain peace that comes when you realize life eventually balances its own scales. 2 days later, my father himself called. It was the first time he'd dialed my number in over a year. His voice trembled slightly. "Emily. We need your help. There's been a mistake with the property documents. Your name is still registered as a co-owner, and we can't proceed without your signature." I could hear the discomfort in his tone. He wasn't used to asking. I said softly, "I understand, Dad. Send me the documents. I'll take a look." There was a long pause. Then he said, "It would mean a lot if you came home to sign them." Home. That word stung a little. I had to remind myself. My peace wasn't there anymore. "I'll think about it," I said, and hung up gently. That night, I made myself tea and sat by the window. The rain tapped lightly against the glass, like the world was whispering, "It's your turn now, but stay kind." I wasn't going to seek revenge. That would make me just like them. But I also wasn't going to make it easy for them to forget what they did. The next morning, I called a lawyer. He was kind, straightforward. After reviewing the documents, he explained that since my name was still legally tied to the property, I had certain rights they had conveniently ignored when they pushed me away. "Technically," he said, "they need your cooperation. But you can set terms, Miss Hart." "Terms?" I repeated. He nodded. "Yes. You can decide what's fair. Maybe you want written acknowledgement of your share, or financial compensation, or even a formal apology. It's up to you." I didn't answer right away. I wasn't interested in money or power. I just wanted acknowledgement, that quiet, invisible justice that comes when the truth finally breathes. A week later, I went back to the house. Everything looked smaller somehow. The garden I once tended was overgrown. The curtains were drawn tight, as if the house itself was ashamed. My mother greeted me at the door, her expression uncertain. My father stood behind her, arms crossed, eyes tired. "Emily," he said quietly, "you look different." "I am," I replied. We sat in the living room, the same place where I had once been told I was a burden. The silence stretched between us like a long, invisible rope, full of everything we hadn't said. Finally, my father spoke. I shouldn't have said what I did that day. I looked at him, trying to find sincerity in his eyes. Maybe there was a flicker of it. Or maybe it was just desperation. I took a deep breath. "Dad, I'm not angry anymore. But you should know something. I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because I had to. Because you made me feel like I didn't belong." He lowered his gaze. My mother wiped her eyes quietly. I continued, "You need my signature, and I'll sign. But I want it in writing that I'm no longer part of any liability tied to your company. I want to walk away clean." He nodded slowly. "That's fair." When I finally signed the papers, my hands didn't shake. I felt steady, grounded, and free. As I handed the folder back, my father said, "You've become strong." I smiled faintly. "I always was. You just never looked close enough to see it." On my way out, my mother stopped me by the door. She held my hand, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Emily. For all of it. I should have spoken up." I squeezed her hand gently. "It's okay, Mom. Sometimes silence teaches louder lessons than words." Then I walked away, not with bitterness, but with peace. Back in my apartment, I looked around the quiet space and felt an unexpected warmth. For so long I had chased belonging, but now I realized something powerful. I didn't need a family to feel whole. I needed myself. I poured tea, sat by the window again, and whispered to the night. The burden they once rejected became the strength they needed. And somewhere deep inside I knew, this was only the beginning of my peace, not the end of my story. The week after I signed those papers felt strangely light, as if years of invisible weight had quietly lifted off my shoulders. For the first time, I didn't wake up dreading the day. There was no guilt, no bitterness, no unfinished war in my chest. Peace, I realized, doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it arrives silently, like morning sunlight filtering through half-drawn curtains. Work at the publishing house became my refuge. I poured myself into stories, editing manuscripts, and helping new writers find their voice. Each word I touched seemed to heal a part of me I didn't know was still broken. One afternoon, my manager called me into her office. "Emily," she said, smiling, "we've noticed your dedication. We'd like to offer you a promotion, lead editor for the new memoir division." I blinked, surprised. "Me?" "Yes, you," she laughed. "You have an eye for truth in words, a kind of quiet wisdom that makes stories come alive." I smiled softly. Maybe all those years of silence had trained me to listen, not just to others, but to life itself. That evening, as I walked home, the streets glowed under the amber lights. I stopped at a small cafe I used to visit years ago. The same waitress was there, older now, but still kind-eyed. She recognized me. "It's been a long time," she said. "Yeah," I replied with a small laugh. "Feels like a different lifetime." I sat by the window with a cup of chamomile tea, watching people pass by. Families, couples, friends, everyone seemed to be in motion, chasing something. I realized I wasn't chasing anymore. I was simply living. And for the first time, that was enough. A few weeks later, I got another call, this time from my younger brother, Daniel. "Emily, can we meet?" His voice was hesitant. We hadn't spoken much since I left. He was younger, still under our parents' shadow. We met at a park near the river. He looked older too, stress showing in his eyes. After a long pause, he said, "Dad's not doing too well. The business failed completely. He's been quiet lately, withdrawn. I think he regrets a lot." I listened, not with anger, but with compassion. People who hurt others often live longer with their own regret than we ever could imagine. "How are you holding up?" I asked. He shrugged. "I'm trying to fix things, but I wish you were around, Em. You always kept everyone grounded." I smiled gently. "I'll always be around, Daniel. Just, not in the same way." He nodded, tears glinting in his eyes. "I miss you." "I miss you too," I whispered. But maybe this distance was meant to teach us what closeness really means. That night, I visited my old home once more, not for signatures or confrontation, but for closure. My father was sitting on the porch, staring into the empty yard. His hair had turned fully gray. His shoulders seemed smaller than I remembered. When he saw me, his eyes softened. "Emily, I didn't think you'd come back again." "I didn't come back," I said softly. "I came to say goodbye properly." He looked down, struggling for words. "I don't expect forgiveness." I nodded. "And I'm not here to offer it like a gift. But I did forgive you a long time ago, not for you but for me. I couldn't keep living inside the hurt." Tears welled in his eyes, and for the first time, he looked human. Not powerful, not cold, just human. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. "Even if I never said it when it mattered." "I know," I whispered. "You didn't have to say it for me to learn my worth." We sat in silence for a while, the same porch where I once stood trembling as he called me a burden. Now the same silence felt different, not suffocating but freeing. When I stood up to leave, he said, "Thank you for still being kind." I smiled faintly. "Kindness isn't weakness, Dad. It's strength that survived pain." That night, as I drove home, the sky was painted with soft streaks of violet. The city lights shimmered below like scattered dreams. I thought about everything: the years I spent trying to earn love, the nights I cried quietly, the strength I found in starting over. And I realized something profound. Sometimes, being the burden teaches you to carry yourself better than anyone ever carried you. Months later, I published my first book, a memoir titled The Quiet Kind of Strength. It wasn't a story about revenge or pain, but about peace, about finding your voice in a world that once silenced you. To my surprise, the book resonated deeply. Letters began to arrive, from people who had been cast aside by their own families, people who found courage in solitude, people who had been called burdens too. Each message reminded me, I wasn't alone. And maybe through my story, neither were they. One evening, while signing copies at a small bookstore, a woman in her 50s approached me. Her eyes were soft, kind, almost motherly. She said, "Your book saved me. I was living in silence too. Reading your words reminded me that it's never too late to start again." Tears filled my eyes. I held her hand and said, "We're all just learning to come home to ourselves." That night, I stood on my balcony, looking out at the city lights, the wind brushing through my hair. I whispered to the universe. They once called me a burden. But life called me necessary. And in that moment, I knew my story had come full circle. Not with revenge, not with triumph, but with peace. The kind that stays quiet yet changes everything. Years have passed since those days. The days when my worth was measured by how useful I was to someone else. Now, when I look back, I can hardly recognize the woman I once was, trembling under words that cut deeper than knives, believing I was a burden because those closest to me said so. I sometimes wonder if I'd still be that same woman had my family not pushed me away. Maybe their rejection was life's most disguised blessing. Because in losing them, I found myself. My book reached places I never imagined. I was invited to small events, libraries, even universities to speak about healing and self-worth. But every time I stood on that stage, I didn't feel like a speaker. I felt like a survivor sharing a quiet truth. I often began my talks with the same line. When they called me a burden, I believed them. Until life showed me that burdens don't break, they build strength. The audience always grew silent when I said that. Because so many people carry invisible weights, and most of them have never been told that their pain is proof of resilience, not weakness. One day, I received a letter, handwritten, shaky, and unsigned. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was my father's. It read, "Emily, I'm proud of the woman you became. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope you live knowing that you were never a burden. You were our blessing, the one we didn't recognize when we had the chance." There were tear stains on the page. I sat there for a long time, the letter trembling in my hands, not out of pain but peace. I didn't cry. I just smiled, a quiet, grateful smile that comes only after years of storms. I didn't reply to that letter. Not because I held a grudge, but because some words are better left floating in the air, sacred and complete. Forgiveness doesn't always need a conversation. Sometimes, it's enough to simply let the past rest in silence, knowing that both hearts finally understand. A few months later, I heard that my father had passed away peacefully in his sleep. I went to the funeral, not as a daughter desperate for closure, but as a woman who had already found it. My mother was there too, fragile and quiet. When she saw me, she broke into tears. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have stood by you. I held her trembling hand. You don't have to apologize, Mom. Life already taught me everything I needed to learn. She nodded, crying silently. I was scared, Emily. Scared to lose the family, scared to question him. I know, I said softly. And that's okay. Fear makes people cruel sometimes. But love, it's what brings them back. She hugged me tightly, perhaps for the first time in years, and in that embrace, decades of pain seemed to dissolve. After that day, I never looked back with bitterness again. I visited her from time to time, not out of duty, but from understanding. We talked about small things, her garden, the weather, her favorite tea. And in those small conversations, I found peace deeper than any apology could offer. Life moved forward gently. I kept writing, not for fame or money, but because writing had become my way of breathing. My second book was about letting go, titled The Art of Stillness. It spoke about how some wars are not meant to be fought, only walked away from. About how peace is not what happens when life gets quiet, but what happens when you do. Readers said it felt like a conversation with an old friend. That was exactly what I wanted it to be. One evening, years later, I found myself sitting by a lake near my small countryside home. The water shimmered under the fading sun. Birds moved across the sky in graceful lines, and the world felt perfectly balanced. I thought about everything, the pain, the distance, the silence that once scared me but later became my sanctuary. And then I thought about that young version of me, the girl who stood in that kitchen as her father called her a burden. I wished I could reach back through time and whisper to her, "Don't let their words define you. Someday, you'll understand that being unwanted by others doesn't make you unworthy. It just means your purpose lies beyond their understanding." Now, when people ask me what revenge means, I smile and say, revenge is not about proving someone wrong. It's about becoming everything they said you couldn't. That, to me, is justice, quiet, graceful, and complete. Because true revenge doesn't humiliate, it enlightens. It doesn't burn bridges, it builds paths to freedom. I sometimes still receive letters from readers, stories from people who were cast aside by their own families, or forgotten by friends, or told they were not enough. And every time I read their words, I feel connected, not through pain, but through survival. We are all carrying stories like invisible scars, and yet we keep walking, keep healing, keep forgiving. As I close my eyes at night now, I no longer replay the cruel moments. Instead, I remember the quiet ones, the tea in my hands, the breeze through my window, the first time I laughed again without guilt. Peace, I've learned, is not the absence of noise, it's the mastery of silence. And maybe that's the greatest victory of all. Before I go to sleep each night, I whisper a small prayer, not of religion, but of gratitude. Thank you, life, for taking away what I didn't need to find who I really am. I've stopped trying to make everyone understand my story. Not everyone will. Some will still see me as the girl who walked away. But I know the truth, I didn't walk away from them. I walked toward myself. And that journey, that was the real redemption. If I could leave one lesson behind for anyone listening to my story, it would be this. Sometimes silence is the best revenge. Because when you stop fighting for people who never fought for you, peace finally knows where to find you. As the night deepens and the stars begin to bloom across the sky, I sit quietly, a soft smile on my face. The world feels calm. My heart feels light. And I finally understand what freedom really means. Not the freedom to escape, but the freedom to forgive and stay at peace. Because in the end, they called me a burden. But life called me enough.